Order. This is the Fast Planning Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, July 2nd. We're doing the call to order at 12:01 p.m. And this is Jack and Fox with Fast Planning. I'm going to go through the roll call list of committee members that I see present. See, we have with us today Yemi Alini sitting in for Nick Zarnecki, Stephen Hope sitting in for Michelle Denton, Kate Duber, Alexa Green, Brett Nelson, John Natardis, Bob Christash, Walker Ringstad, Bill Rogers, Don Galligan sitting in for Kellen Spillman, RJ Stump, and Jacob Toyrick. Committee members that I believe are absent at this time includes Michael Bradley, Justin Burgess, Tim Glidden, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, and John Weinberger. Any one of those folks on the committee that I just listed present, and I just missed you. Okay, we'll consider them absent at this time, but we do have quorum. For Fast Planning staff members, we have myself, Jackson Fox, Olivia Lunsford, Roy Tigliano, and Deborah Todd. And then for guests in the meetings today, we have with us Sarah Shocker, Mary Farrell, Jack Barnwell, Cody Luigi, Megan Flory, and Al Beck. Are there any other guests in the meeting today I didn't announce? Okay, seeing none. So we have with us today. Let's move on to approval of the July 2nd, 2025 meeting agenda. Can I get a motion on the agenda? Move. All right, thanks, Bob. Is there a second? Thanks, Bill. Any changes to today's agenda? Hearing none, anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? Okay, hearing none, will consider it approved. That takes us to approval of the June 4th, 2025 meeting minutes, which are included on pages 2 through 7 of the packet. Can I get a motion on the minutes? Thank you, Bill. Is there a second? Thank you, Bob. Okay, any edits to the minutes? Hearing none, anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as presented in the packet? Okay, hearing none, we'll consider those approved. That takes us to our staff working group and chair report, which begins on page 8 in the packet. But Olivia, if you wouldn't mind, can we pull up the flyer for the Chino Lake Rec Area open house real quick? Just one real quick announcement here. There are flyers printed in the room, and we're pulling it up on the screen as well. There will be an open house event for the Chino Lake Recreation Area Bike and Ped Access Project via Plaque Road on Wednesday, August 2nd from 5 to 7 p.m. One of our more exciting projects here at Fast Planning. Also even more exciting, I hear that John Natardis is going to be on the grill out there. So, if nothing else, go out there and say hi to John and learn more about that project. We'll try to spread the word via social media and whatnot, but anyways, here's a good excuse to get out to Chino Lake this summer if you haven't already been. Okay, back to the staff report here. Just a few items from the policy board meeting on June 18th. There are 2 action items at that meeting. Was to approve TIP administrative modification number 6, as well as our letter to Governor Dunleavy supporting continuation of the Roads and Highways Advisory Board. Both of those items did advance at the policy board meeting. For TIP administrative modification number 6, there was one late request or late addition to that administrative modification from DOT. We added a new project site for the DOT preventative maintenance program. And this is to do some resurfacing work on the Parks Highway near the Sheep Creek Road extension intersection there in conjunction with that larger project. So that was added into that program. And that was something that the technical committee had not seen in the administrative modification, but we added it just before the policy board approval. And then in relation to the letter to the governor supporting the continuation of the Roads and Highways Advisory Board, which sunsetted on Monday of this week. and they're not planning to continue to meet. They did approve our letter. However, the board did remove a couple of the bullets in the letter referencing the continuing resolution of planning findings and corrective action items for the STIP, as well as the delays in delivery of federally funded transportation projects to construction across the state. But then they added in a new bullet highlighting the recent concerns with the state match shortage for the STIP, which we'll talk about here briefly. So they removed two bullets, but they added one. That letter was transmitted alongside the letter from the Associated General Contractors as well as the Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce. And no response has been received to date. Okay, next page, starting on page 9. This was the big news at our last policy board meeting regarding the governor's vetoes of state match funding for the statewide transportation improvement program, or the STIP. We just received this letter last week from the commissioner's office explaining the vetoes and the situation that DOT is in. The explanation provided at the policy board meeting from the deputy commissioner, I didn't entirely understand, but I did go back and listen to some of the hearings in both the House Finance Committee and Senate Finance Committee related to how they set up the state match for the STIP for this year, next year, this year and next year. And it sounded like the legislature was short on general fund dollars, and what they were attempting to do was pull state funds from old installed projects, old match accounts. And I mean, just in general, projects that have been idle and were not advancing. And so it would be a reappropriation of those state funds to new projects that are now shown in the STIP. And that's somewhat explained here in this letter. However, we heard from the deputy commissioner that there are some challenges with completing that reappropriation, since some of these are open active projects with federal highways and would need to be closed out. And potentially there might be some payback of some federal funds that have been expended to date on those. But just as far as an order of magnitude, the actual vetoes are shown on pages 11, 12, and 13. The vetoes included 52 million in state match for the federal aid highway program, and then about $10 million in state match for the federal aviation program. And the biggest project on here that I can see where the match was vetoed, that would be for the Juneau Access Project, and between two different line items, that totals about 37 million. Looking a little bit further into that project, we go to page 15. You have the press release. You'll see that here recently, back in May, the governor had actually already reappropriated the funds for the Juneau Access Project to the Cascade Point Ferry Terminal. So in any event, the idea is that these funds were not are not available to be reappropriated as state match for other projects in the STIP. I still don't completely understand the advantage of vetoing these state match dollars as opposed to trying to work through the reappropriation process and still having them available. I did see that the governor today has called the legislature back into special session on August 2nd, I believe it is. But on his list of items for the special session, resolution of the loss of state match dollars is not included in that list. At this time, it's just education reform and the creation of the Department of Agriculture. So there's still some question marks in my mind about all this and how the STIP can move forward. And the letter received from the commissioner's office indicated that the 2025 federal fiscal year in the STIP is solid, but this will lead to a lot less construction and projects in 2026 and 2027 if the state match isn't restored with general fund dollars by the legislature, which a conclusion of that won't come until May or June of next year. And so that'll be mid construction season. So I don't have, again, I have a lot more questions. I don't have a lot of answers. I've tried to research as best that I could. And don't fully understand all of the dynamics here, other than, this is a very serious concern for the STIP and our local contractors throughout the state. That's going to conclude my staff report, so I don't know if our DOT representatives have any other information to add or correct.
Sure.
Yes, the questions.
The service improvement projects for next year. This lack of funding you're talking about that you don't from the government.
So if you're referencing like our fast improvement program, that's a local match property. So the city and the borough and university, if they pay their match for their projects, those are held harmless because it's a local match source. Hey, Kim. Thanks. Looks like we ran out of seats for you, so. For the record, Tim Glidden, City of North Walton, joined us here. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, then we'll move on to our open public comment period. Are there any, is there any public comment today from folks online or in the room? Okay, not seeing anybody online, not seeing anyone in the room. So we'll go ahead and close the general public comment period and move on to old business. The STIP amendment number 2, a status update from DOT on the STIP submittal of the STIP amendment, which includes the AMATs and fast planning TIP amendments. One thing I will note, I did get an email yesterday evening, a letter from the Commissioner's office indicating that the STIP amendment had been turned into the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration on July 1st, yesterday. I did speak with the division director of the Federal Highway Administration this morning. And he did indicate that it appears that the fast planning and AMATs TIP amendments were included in that submittal. And that's all the information that I know of at this time, but that would start the 30-day clock for federal highways within the Federal Transit Administration to complete their review and consideration of approval of the STIP amendments and our TIP amendments. But it does put us into a tight timeline such that each year we strive to get in all of our federal fiscal year end obligations into federal highways by August 1st. And that's all the information I know at this time. Is there any other update from DOT folks?
That's about what I know at the time being. I'll only add that the goal for approval, the DOT's goal is July 15th approval, but that's a quick turnaround for them. We'll see, but that's the goal. And then that the notification that the STIP had been submitted came with comment response letters to the 3 MPOs that went out yesterday from the commissioner to the 3 MPOs. Also board chairs.
Yep.
Well, I haven't had a chance to review those yet, but
Yes, I have a copy of that as well. Okay, any questions on the update on STIP amendment number 2? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our first action item, which may or may not be an action item here today. But we have listed as an action item a letter to DOT requesting that the AMATs and fast planning TIP amendments be submitted to the Federal Highway Administration separately from STIP amendment number 2. This letter is on page 17 in the packet there. The request for this letter to be included in the packet came from Kellen Spellman with Borough's Community Planning Department, provided that both fast planning and AMATs had their policy boards had adopted our most recent TIP amendments and submitted those to DOT in mid-April. And so it's been sitting in the commissioner's office for a few months and it had not been advanced to our federal partners for approval. So this letter was drafted and included in a meeting packet that went out on Friday. But of course, we just learned that last night, the STIP amendment and our TIP amendments have been sent on to our federal partners for approval. So it might make the point of this letter mute unless technical committee members want to take up this letter and modify the communication. Like in the future, please submit these separately and don't wait for a STIP amendment to be prepared. But that's up to the committee. So at this time, I guess I'll just see if there's any questions before we go to public comment and see if there is or is not a motion on this item. Yes, Don.
Just, so I guess to try and avoid this situation again, where they feel like they have to submit everything at once. Do we know like when they're planning on doing STIP submittals, and can we offset our request? So that it doesn't just hang around in their office for months and months while they work on their requests?
I do not have a schedule from DOT as to when they're gonna do their next one. As I understand from one of the two letters I just got from the commissioner's office, there's likely not gonna be another STIP amendment. There'll just be a brand new STIP that is published in draft form. And that likely would occur in 2026. But I don't know that DOT necessarily has a set schedule for STIP amendments that kind of come up as needed. I know we're all working towards trying to establish a schedule for both our TIP amendments and STIP amendments such that we get ours done in advance of a STIP amendment so that their fiscal constraint can capture the fund expenditures within our boundaries. But yes, I don't have a schedule from DOT at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item here today regarding the letter to DOT requesting that our MPO's TIP amendments be submitted separately from the STIP amendment? I'm not seeing any public comments, so I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. I'll now entertain a motion, if any. If no motion is made on this item, we simply won't advance it to the policy board meeting. You could make a motion to not advance this to the policy board meeting since it's no longer an issue. Or make a motion to modify the letter for future TIP amendment submittals. Or no motion at all, again. Or if anybody would like to further some discussion before the motion's made, I'm okay with that. Going once. Going twice. Okay, for the record, no motion was made on this action item here today, and this letter will not advance to the policy board. If the issue comes back up in the future, we'll return to it, but at this time, it doesn't look like we need to act on this, provided a STIP amendment and our TIP amendments have been turned into our federal partners as of yesterday. Okay, moving on to new business, item 8A. Letter to DOT requesting information on MPO coordination items. This begins on page 24 in the packet. And the request for this letter to be included on the agenda and for me to draft this up came from two of our policy board members, which included Mayor Church and our chair, Councilmember Cleworth. There's 4 bulleted items here where we need some more information from the commissioner's office on some MPO coordination items provided the last few statewide MPO quarterly meetings where we as staff, we meet with the other 2 MPOs, our state DOT partners, at the staff level, as well as the commissioner's office and our federal partners. Every quarter, we meet either in Fairbanks, Anchorage, or Juneau, and sometimes down in Matsu. These items have been on the agenda for the last few quarterly meetings, and we've not come away from the table with any discrete answers or information on these 4 items that I guess makes us feel comfortable moving forward. So rather than to continue asking for this information at these meetings, we're putting this on letterhead as a formal request to the commissioner's office to provide us written responses for these and provide more information than what we've been receiving at these meetings. So the first thing that we're looking for is we'd simply like a spreadsheet showing an annual distribution notice of all of our federal funds that are sub-allocated to our area. This includes our common fund categories for what we call as STPG, their Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, our Transportation Alternatives Program, our Carbon Reduction Program, and our 2 different pots of funding for the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. At this time, we are only receiving an annual letter from DOT sharing with us what our planning fund amounts are. But we have not received for some time new calculations for these other federal fund categories. And the infrastructure bill has basically a rough estimate of the amount of funding that we would receive, but then each year those funds actually get apportioned to the state and they show more specific allocation amounts. But then there's a split in funding in our population category between Matsu and Fairbanks. We have the formula, we can calculate it ourselves and show that in our TIP document. However, in my opinion, it's best that we receive an official communication from DOT and what our amounts are, because they may have to hold back some obligation limitation for other reasons why these numbers may be adjusted slightly in consideration of inflation and other things that DOT factors in. So despite a request to get these amounts for federal fiscal year 2026, which begins October 1st, I've not yet received these amounts from DOT, which is something that has been past practice, but we didn't receive the official numbers for this current federal fiscal year, and we have not received them yet for the next federal fiscal year. And we would like to see on letterhead from DOT what these amounts actually are so that we can fully program our TIP. The next one is last year around this time, the Technical Committee and Policy Board did review the draft policy and procedure on MPO coordination that DOT was developing. The Technical Committee and Policy Board did pass motions making comments on that to ask DOT in that policy and procedure to specifically or expressly identify when the MPO is supposed to be the policy board, or when they're referring to the MPO as at the staff level in different sections of that document, and also adding more detail on who is responsible for doing what with expected timelines, particularly in the STIP development section. And so these comments that were sent to DOT a year ago have not been fully addressed yet in this policy and procedure. As you read it, there is still confusion between who is being communicated with, whether that's the policy board, the technical committee, or MPO staff. And there's no staff positions at DOT that are identified as being responsible for those communications or those tasks or specific timelines of when things will be done and how long they will take. So I know that this is still a working document, but we did not see this this policy and procedure being even implemented with STIP amendment number 2. So we're still waiting for this task to be wrapped up. It may never be wrapped up, but we just wanted to put on record that we're still waiting for our comments to be resolved within the document. The next one is that the state of Alaska was awarded a US DOT grant for the project prioritization pilot program. You can see that on the US DOT that Alaska was awarded that grant. We were listed as partners on that grant and plan to participate in the effort. At our last MPO quarterly meeting, we heard that potentially those funds are frozen still in Washington, DC and have not yet been released. But I think we'd like a definitive answer from DOT on if those funds are still frozen, or when they become unfrozen, are you going to accept the funds? Do you have the match to pay for that I don't even know if the grant required match, but we'd like an official update for the technical committee and policy board on that. And then similarly, the last bullet there. DOT is now working on an update to their statewide long range transportation plan, their freight plan and rail plan, and they're developing their first ever statewide transit plan. And we understand that these updates are underway, but there hasn't been an invitation to any of the three MPOs to participate in the process yet, as far as serving on a steering committee or reviewing draft documents or being invited to open house events or online surveys for them. So we would like to know what the specific engagement opportunities will be for all of us. We'd like to know who are the folks that are working on these. Do they have consultant teams, and what the project development schedule is as far as, you know, looking forward. When are you doing your vision and goals? When's the, you know, draft plan going to be prepared for public comment? When do you plan to finalize these plans? Kind of all the normal things that go along with a planning process. So, and the details that have been provided to me have been a little bit vague as to what's actually happening with these plans. Of one of the bigger concerns to me is the statewide rail plan. This was last completed 10 or so years ago, and Fairbanks was left out of that planning effort at that time. So we really want to follow along with that, and we've done our own road rail crossing study within our boundary. We'd like to make sure that all of our planning efforts get put into the statewide rail plan. So that's an important one to us. So in any event, this is a letter request again from two policy board members that they wanted me to write up, send it to the technical committee and policy board to get this on record to the commissioner's office that we would like some detailed information for all four of these items. And that concludes my summary. Yes, Brett.
Maybe in the summary still, I could speak to a couple of those that.
Absolutely,
got some
yes.
Updates, and then that maybe that would help shape, or, you know, whatever comes out of that for a letter. So for the first bullet, I don't have any information on. The 3C process, as you had mentioned, we discussed at our June MPO
Yep.
quarterly meeting. And kind of the rough plan was, and those, resolution of those comments that were submitted, that's still outstanding, you know, the specifics. But the general process for this 3C process was, Ben White was heading that up. He was gonna make some more internal comments to kind of shape it up, and then we were gonna work with the MPOs, executive directors, I think, first, and then have a better draft, and then prepare something in the fall that could be sent to all three technical committees if possible, and to get that moving forward. But that's kind of a generic or general answer,
Yep.
not specifics. So that's kind of overall plan for the 3C process. Hasn't been discounted or set aside, but it's kind of been a long, slow, painful process getting it implemented. Say that. For the PPPP, the update it has just yesterday, we heard from Alaska Division of Federal Highways. They still had not gotten any updates on that because of the switch in transit, the administrations. So they were gonna reach out to the program office to get an update of where that stood. So that's not a full, complete answer either, but that's kind of the status update of where it's at. So we haven't heard, you know, that it's gone away, but we haven't heard, you know, any movement there either. And some other grants that we've were awarded, like for Delton Highway bridges, that was a grant. Some things have been really slow getting them restarted. So with the loss of staff at Federal Highways, it's just been, everything's kind of been slow down. So. And then as far as the plans, you had mentioned at the end there, the RTP, that's gonna kick off this summer. Right now we're getting organized to get a project team and make a timeline and get a public involvement plan together. And they'll be reaching out for the MPOs for involvement on the update as soon as it's kicked off. So definitely MPOs are an integral part of that. So. And transit and freight plans, the transit plan and the freight plans will kick off around the same time, most likely this fall. We're working on the RFPs for those. And the freight plan is also gonna include, waterways plan and truck parking study. Those gonna be kind of rolled together. We have 3 products that are gonna come out of it. So we're working on I'm working on the RFP for the freight plan, waterways plan and truck parking study right now.
Okay.
And the rail plan, we've had meetings with the Alaska Railroad with Brian and Kate, scoping that, making sure that, things are, understood and getting input from the Alaska Railroad. So make sure that it's shaped correctly for what's needed, and it's certainly, Fairbanks and the appeal will be involved with that. So I'm part of the team with that, so I'll make sure that Fairbanks is included. So that get underway, that's kind of the first one out of these ones, get like underway late this summer, early fall. And just kind of nailing down the scope and strategy right now for the railroad and getting RFP together. So those are updates on those things that are part of this letter, so. Not sure if that shapes anything, but that's what I know. Or anybody has any questions?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that update. So yeah, as questions come up. And some of these, yeah, bullets could be removed based on some of these updates. But some of this I think is still valid to get a written response and, schedules and whatnot. So, and another burning question about these is whether or not they're all going to be consultant-led efforts, or if some of this work's going to be done in-house.
Back to the plans with the transit plan, freight plan and rail plan. And the RTP, those are kind of like, we've been sorting out internally, getting a new term contract in place, but then also having some separate contracts. That's why we're doing RFPs for the specialized plans. So there's been kind of sorting out of that strategy internally to get consultants on board to help out with that, because that's beyond our expertise in many of those areas.
Okay. Any other questions for me or for Brett at this time?
Jackson?
Yeah.
Did the policy board ask you to draft this, go back to the policy board?
Yes.
And so, given Brett has told us, still requesting the information, basically a summary of what he said in writing, still seems reasonable then to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Phil.
Maybe you said, maybe I missed it, is Amas and Matsu sending a similar letter?
Not to my knowledge, no. Yes, Don.
Just kind of a formality here, but do you think we should include Lauren Little on the CC?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's just an oversight there, yeah. All right, any other questions? Okay, here now, is there any public comment on this item here today? Okay, not hearing any public comment at this time. So I'll now entertain a motion on the letter. Okay, go ahead, Bob.
I move that, we forward this, request for information on outstanding MPO coordinated items to the policy board for their opinion.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Don. Okay, further discussion or any amendments you'd like to see in the letter? Yes, Don.
Just one question, would this be an appropriate letter, do you think, to add something about the STIP development and STIP schedule? In terms of, what we just talked about on the previous item, or updates, getting some sort of a regular schedule.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, that is the state's short range funding plan. And so that kind of coincides with the last bullet of getting an update on what's going to be the schedule for the development of the next STIP, if they're not doing an amendment next.
Yeah, I would think at least at a minimum, maybe we could get an update as to when the next step will be planned to be completed. On a draft one.
Is that a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Don made a motion to add a fifth bullet to the letter, requesting an update on the schedule for development of the next step. Do you concur with that motion, Don? What I just said?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is there a second to that motion? All right, second by Bob. All right, discussion on that motion for the fifth bullet.
I think, you know, when, like you said, that the STIP is, kind of the short range plan. And I think it's appropriate since we're asking for schedule updates on all the other plans that they have in motion, that we would include this as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Don. I think it makes sense to me as well. Any other discussion or debate on adding the fifth bullet? Not hearing any arguments here, so I'll just ask if there's anyone opposed to adding that fifth bullet to the letter. Okay, hearing none, we'll consider that amendment approved, and we're back to the main motion as amended. Any other amendments, changes to the letter? Any further discussion on the letter in general? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and call roll on this action item. For the main motion as amended, and this would be to advance the letter to the policy board for approval. Including the addition of the fifth bullet requesting an update on, for schedule for the development of the next step. And we're gonna start with Dawn.
Yes.
RJ,
Yes.
Jacob? Yes. Yemi,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Tim? Yes. Alexa,
Yes.
Brett? Abstain. John?
Abstain.
Bob?
Yeah,
Walker? Yes. And Bill?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. All right, we'll move on to our next item on our new business, item 8D, the federal fiscal year 2026 fast improvement program, which begins on page 26 in your packet. If you were not present, for your general awareness, we did hold a subcommittee meeting on June 9th to look at priorities for project sites throughout our metropolitan planning area for construction in 2026. This page here that's in front of you, page 26, highlights what's going to construction in 2025. What was planned to go to construction in 2026 with some updated cost estimates, which the total has raised a little bit higher than what we have programmed in our latest tip, and then the list of contingency projects. And then the next page, page 27, highlights for you all the worksheet that we went through at that meeting. As far as modifying some of the scopes of these items, for example, City of Fairbanks, there was one location removed, Joyce Drive. Because that's gonna be self-funded by the city. And then for Shannon Drive, the scope expanded to increase the length of that project from 1,000 to 3,300 feet. And then there was some additional project locations that were added for North Pole, UAF, the borough, and the state DOT. So John Tardis and his crew took this list and went and did site visits following that meeting. And then the next page, page 28 in the packet, I showed you the estimates for each of those existing and new locations that I received on Friday, June 27th. So I think here our next step is I will send out a doodle poll today or tomorrow to try to identify a meeting date and time for this month to reconvene, to focus in on this page here, page 28, this table. And look at what we want to pull together as far as a recommendation for 2026 construction. And then everything that doesn't make it on that list will move out to 2027 to 2028 constructions. I know with some of these new locations, it may prove to be a challenge for John Lataris because he'll have to do a reevaluation of his environmental document. And may or may not have to go back for local planning approvals, since some of these new sites weren't included on the original list. But I think that we can have that discussion at the next subcommittee meeting. As well as at that meeting, I want to specifically discuss potentially increasing the amount available to the program for construction in 2026, provided we still have $1.7 million of funding that's not programmed to any project next year. And so we could definitely raise the bar if we would like to on this program for construction next summer. So those would be my topics for the next subcommittee meeting. And that there is no action on this item here today, but I did want to turn it over to John Lataris to see if there's anything that he would like to add, things that he learned over the past month as he looked at some of these sites, or share any of his thoughts on what he thinks for 2026 construction.
Sure. There's a lot of documents with a lot of info all over it. It'll be really cleaned up next time you see it. Hopefully the subcommittee will come together and decide some things that we'll go with, because whenever I get it from subcommittee, we're taking it and gonna run with it, and then hope that the technical and policy board agree.
Yep.
Currently, the only thing in the environmental document for 26 is all the priorities from page 26. I don't know if you can bring page 26 back up. Yeah, there you go. The middle box and everything in the bottom box are all in our environmental document. But none of this new stuff is, and we appreciate everyone who went out with us. I think Jacob and Glidden, Tim over there, and some other folks went out with us and did some site visits, and we got all our estimates together. You go to page 27. I don't think we did a bunch of those other not yet sponsored ones. And I'm not sure if you want us to estimate all those prior to this subcommittee meeting or not. We just had a lot of stuff to do on top of things that weren't this.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, understood.
Yep. Where am I going with all this? There's a couple things that we could like rule out immediately, hopefully, and one of those is Bob was building Joyce Drive right on your own.
Yes,
Yeah, so I mean, I can take that out right now out of page 26, the past 26 priorities. And then the second one, I believe the mayor in North Pole was okay with removing Andrea Drive.
Mhm.
You know, he indicated that at another meeting, I believe, policy board. So I was gonna strike that, but I kind of want to get an idea as soon as possible of which kind of big items we can add. And the page 28 list is the latest and greatest numbers. Except for the Mitchell, Gina and Johansson, the Mitchell and Johansson Bridge decking cost is not 3.5 million, it's actually 900,000. And then we also split that out between each one, if that's something that the subcommittee or this committee selects is one of those bridges to be repaved. I split them out individually as well. So it can be confusing, just contact me if you have any questions about any of these numbers or how we came up with them. I guess that's all I got. Are we gonna go to a subcommittee and decide, then come back here again and then to policy board for final like 26, what we're doing?
Yes, that's the process.
Okay.
But the hope is our next meeting that the recommendation comes out of subcommittee.
Okay, good. Can we have that meeting in like within 2 weeks?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
that's my intention, is to get out a doodle poll today or tomorrow, and then look at the next 2 weeks availability for folks.
Okay, I guess my biggest question is in the other column in the bottom right box, does this committee want us to look further into those now, or do you think we have enough to go off of for next year?
I think we have enough to go off of, unless we're not meeting that threshold of 20% non-motorized and 80% motorized.
Okay.
Then we would need to focus on that bottom right hand column.
Oh, and then, estimate, so Shannon Drive, Bob wanted us to extend it from whatever it was previously to have 1,300 more feet or so, and so the.
2,000 more,
How much?
2,000.
2,000 more. And so the cost shown right now is the estimate from DOT, but we would need to revise that too, with City of Fairbanks input.
I just sent you an email on that, John.
Awesome. Great. Okay, does anyone have questions about all these numbers and areas and items and stuff? Awesome. All right, well, subcommittee, we'll put it together. We'll have a package that equals whatever amount of funding you can provide and, yeah, look forward to next meeting where we finalize that. I guess my last question is, how much money are we gonna have? And,
that's-
and
yeah.
does it require a TIF/STIP amendment or approval or any of that stuff? Because that kind of derailed us on 25.
This would just require. We could get it with it underneath the threshold for an admin mod, so it can be approved at a single meeting.
Cool.
And this program is exempt from air quality, so
Okay,
we're pretty safe here.
awesome.
But I'd like to see this program get up to at least 2 million for construction next summer, at least, if not 2.5 million.
All right, with that being said, I need to look at design budgets and stuff. I'm always asking for more money for that.
Yep.
But, I might be asking for more too. Sure. Okay,
But yeah, again, we have an additional 1.7 million available next year that hasn't gone to any particular project. I know there's increases that come up over the year. But I would be very comfortable taking half of that funding and giving it to this program
awesome.
if we have project sites that are supported here. It's a, yeah, preventative maintenance projects is a really good use of our funding.
Cool, all right,
Okay,
thank you.
I'll get that doodle poll out. And we'll move on to our last agenda item and update to FAST Finance policies and procedure and development of our TIP for short range funding plan. This begins on page 29. Similar to the last item, this is not an action item here for you today. I just want to, and I don't have any revisions prepared to show you here today, but I just want to make note that we have a series of policies and procedures that relate to our TIP and our funding plan. And most of these we haven't really taken a hard look at to revise them to be current with, current practice. But also I think that there's definitely some room for improvement, in our TIP development process. So my plan was at the staff levels to begin revising this to bring you all some markups at our next meeting in August. I made some notes to just kind of give you an idea of some of the revisions I'm thinking about. One is on page 40 there, adding some clarity that the individual projects that we program in the TIP must come from our long range transportation plan. I mean, really the way the process is supposed to work is our long range transportation plan identifies all the needs and projects for our transportation system over the next 20 years. And we prioritize those projects in that short range category as what should be advanced into the next TIP. And really the only contingency there is that, you know, the local governments that may manage that right away, you know, are they going to sponsor the match and maintenance for that project to move forward? But typically in our short range, we have more projects than, they won't all get funded, but it is a really good list to pull from your own MTP. So I really want to provide that clarity in here. That when we develop our next TIP, we're not necessarily looking for new project ideas. We should have identified those new project ideas during development of our long range transportation plan. And then explain some of the exceptions for our programs, like the fast improvement program. We don't score those projects. It's preventative maintenance style projects. Whereas all of the projects nominations that we receive, we do score. And then HSIP also works differently, where it's a very data-driven process to identify which projects are selected for that funding. So I wanted to identify some of those project exceptions for clarity. Identify that we'll be developing a new TIP every 4 years, better define what a significant change in scope would be that would trigger having to have a project rescored for the TIP. And then moving forward here to. Pardon me, with that, page 33. We have a separate policy on how our funding table is set up in our tip. And this is not, I don't think this has been updated for a while, 2 years at least, but this isn't. The way this policy is written isn't necessarily being followed as current practice here. We have modified the format of our tip, over the course of, I guess since I've taken this, position. And so we need to modernize this particular policy to match current practice, but also discuss advantages and disadvantages of potentially changing our different tables. Currently, we have a table for all of our projects that we fund with our sub allocations that typically go into local road improvements for the 2 cities and the borough, UAF, et cetera. Then we have a separate table for projects that are funded with statewide apportionments like highway projects. And then we have an air quality project table, and then we have a project table for the Federal Transit Administration. And within each one of those tables, we have different programs like DOT's preventive maintenance program, our fast improvement program, the highway safety improvement program, and our new carbon reduction program. Where for some programs, we individually list all the projects. Other programs, we just put in a lump sum of funding. And then in the scope description, we identify the projects that they're funding kind of year to year. But as far as a member of the public or a policy board member trying to find a particular project in our funding plan, it can be confusing because some are hidden within programs and other ones are listed individually. It's like, well, where's this project? And I continue to have to point that out to members of the public and other folks that reach out to me. So it might be to our advantage to list all of our projects individually. And regardless of funding source, put them all in alphabetical order. I'm not sure if this is a good idea or a bad idea. But these are options that I want to discuss with you all next month. Because I do know hiding projects within a program or the details not there gives you the most flexibility to change your priorities, mid-year. And like what we're doing right now, the fast improvement program, we're taking out Joyce, we're expanding Shannon. If you don't have everything locked into a specific scope within the program, then you have that flexibility to make a change pretty quickly. So again, there's advantages and disadvantages of doing what I'm describing here. And I'm trying to sort that out in my mind, what might be best for everybody involved. So I'm gonna take a look at this and I might do like a version A and a version B. That kind of go the couple different directions, so you see how that might be set up. And I really do want to rely on the technical committee to provide me some advice or some direction to the policy board and how we'd like to have this set up in the future. Page 36 is our current maintenance policy, which hasn't changed in 10 years. It doesn't say much. A number of years ago, we tried to expand this and make it much more detailed. But that didn't go over well. I don't know if there is or is not interest to modify the language here. But it's within the package here, so we might, if there's interest from the committee in taking this back up to potentially strengthen that policy, we can. Or if you want to leave it alone like we did last time, we can do that as well. And then page 48, I think that we can make some improvements here to our definitions on project scope changes, deliverability concerns, for cost estimate revisions. A lot of the projects that we have in our tip, we're working with cost estimates that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And so we might want to set in policy a schedule that we ask DOT to update their SSEs for their projects to program in the tip, like say once every other year, something to that effect. But just have an expectation there that we really don't want to be working with an estimate that's more than 2 years old. Some specificity like that. And then project funding increases. We do have an authority, a table on page 49. That I think has actually been working pretty well for us moving forward. But we could discuss potentially modifying those thresholds higher or lower if there's interest from the committee. Yeah, and then beginning on page 39, air quality conformity and our interagency coordination process. This also has not been updated for 10 years, and through the conformity creep, we've been doing a lot of interagency consultations, and so I think I can definitely revise this to match, current practice. Since I'm getting a better feel for what does work and what does not work well with our federal partners and DOT and such, and each, organization's role in that interagency consultation process. There's also an agreement that we work on, top of page 40 there. That hasn't been updated for 15 years. And in reviewing that with Nick Zarnecki and Yemi Alini at DEC, potentially opened that back up for some revision to match that up to more current practice. So anyways, I think there's some room for improvement here. And I have a lot of ideas, and I'm hoping to present to you all with some revisions and some options next month. Yes, Don?
There's a lot here. I mean,
Yes, I do.
there's quite a bit, even just in your description just now. I could see a lot of work that will required. I don't know that. I mean, I would suggest that maybe we consider a subcommittee for this. I don't know how far we would get in terms of the entire committee, just looking at something that you've revised. I think there's probably enough here, definitely enough here, and enough interest in the room to form a subcommittee to work on that. It doesn't have to be anything real big, but kind of like what we did for the local improvement program. Or kind of like what we've been working on for the complete streets. And just something like that, and we could do a review and come with ideas and that sort of thing, because I think there are quite a bit of areas that have changed over time.
Appreciate that. All right, we're gonna do a call for volunteers. Who wants to serve on the subcommittee? All right, Don does. I'm gonna appoint Randy Bailey, who works with us on a daily basis. Bob, okay. And it'll either be for specifically the air quality section, I'll try to grab either Yemi or Nick. We have a meeting discussing those, but anyone else interested? It can be a small working group. Okay. Well, if you're interested in the future, just give me a call, shoot me an email. But yeah, I'll establish that subcommittee and put together a schedule to meet every other week for an hour or so to take on one or two policies. All right, any other questions or discussion on that item? Okay, here none, we're gonna move on to informational items, so monthly update, federal action potentially impacting MPOs. Today I only have one and it's not included in the packet, since this was posted on the US DOT website yesterday. But out of US DOT, there's a new initiative called Safe Roads. That is tasking each state DOT within 60 days, to develop a list of arterial segments, including intersections with the highest safety, operational, and compliance concerns that will be addressed by the end of federal fiscal year 2026. So I think that would be projects this current year and projects next year. And the state DOT is supposed to be working in coordination with the metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs to develop this list. And so we will have this on the agenda for the technical committee next month in August. But provided this directive came out just yesterday, I don't know if the DOT necessarily has a plan for the work yet, but the MPOs are supposed to be involved in development of that list. And so next month, our technical committee meeting will be the middle of that 60 days. We're kind of a check-in on what type of list, at least for our area, is being developed. So, and what that necessarily looks like. It really is like a one-page letter. So, and I didn't see any other details as far as, I guess, more specificity as to what the headquarters office is looking for this. Or the intended use of it, but that is a task this has a very quick turnaround. So that's my only update there. And then moving on to obligations and offsets, page 41. Our obligations are up to 59% now. That's in part due to West Tanana Drive and 8th Avenue getting out to bid. And the Northern Region Signal Interconnect got its next big plug of design funding, but being July, we're still very far behind in obligations this year at 59%. And again, the deadline or the internal deadline at DOT to get in obligations for the remainder of these projects is August 1st. And so there will be a big push this month on the DOT side to obligate the rest of our funding. But things are definitely behind schedule there. Page 43 is our current offset balance. We have about 250,000. And I understand there may be some need for this funding for both Cal Street reconstruction referral improvement program, 8th Avenue in particular. But I would like to use up this funding this month prior to August 1st. So as the requests come in, we will allocate those funds to those projects, and if additional funds are needed, we'll likely use advanced construction dollars, so borrow funding from 2026 and show that in a TIP administrative modification in August. So just because I believe the two requests that are pending to me will likely exceed this amount combined together. But we'll see where they come in at. I have not seen prices yet for the next two construction increases. But again, I would like to see this balance zero by the end of the month. And then page 44 is our current project closures list. There's just a couple on there that we're tracking. Any questions on obligations and offsets? Okay. Hearing none. Any committee member comments today?
Like, you know,
Yeah, we have John.
those with obligations and offsets and stuff, kind of, the Pioneer Park floodings and all the federal and all that stuff, we were gonna obligate in fiscal year 26, but we've had some delays at department, so we still want to construct at 27. But we may have to change the funding. Just 27. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate that update. Any other committee member comments? Yes, John.
You already said it at the
You can
beginning.
double dip.
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead.
You already said it at the beginning, but Chino Lake Rec Area, public open house, August 6th. Come out there, check it out. It's gonna be a cool project.
Yeah, there will be a really cool project.
Sarah's here, she's designing it.
Yep. All right, seeing no other comments, can I get a motion to adjourn? John Nataris has the motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Second by Bob. Anyone opposed?
No.
Hearing none, we're adjourned at 1:04 p.m.
Was it quick?
Not right.